Hey, welcome back to ZK MasterTech. Got the 9560RT back in that I previously worked on. Did a video on it where we replaced the low pressure fuel pump on it, and it did help it a little bit, but we were still having issues with an extended crank. I had the customer bring it in because you have to let it sit for a long period of time to go start it and actually get it to act up. So I thought it'd just be easier to get it here since they don't live that far away, so we can try to get this thing figured out. So what I figured out on this thing is I do know that we are leaking fuel from the fuel injectors into the cylinders. I confirmed that by priming the system up a few times and letting it sit, and eventually enough fuel will leak down into the cylinder to whenever you start it, you get that knocking sound of that extra fuel in there trying to compress. Kind of sounds like you're ether locking it almost. And then you got the white smoke coming out the exhaust. So I did put a new fuel return pressure regulator in it, which kind of has a check valve in it, and it helps check at least 10 psi into the system. I did try that. We're still getting an extended crank. It's not super terrible right now. I mean, we're talking like 2 to 3 extra seconds of what it should be, so it's not like terrible, but the customer wants it to be perfect. So I started looking at our cranking speed whenever I was doing a recording, looking at all the data for hard starting, and our cranking RPM was kind of low. It was like 137 RPM, should be up there around 200. Looked at the batteries. Yep, they were teenagers. Yep, 2012 was the date on the batteries, and this tractor is a 2012. So the original batteries in this tractor, making it 13 years, they were John Deere batteries. Kind of a miracle in my opinion for batteries to last that long in this thing. So I told the customer he's a battery whisperer. Whatever he's doing, just keep it up. And then I got to looking at the starter. Starter was original too. I put an amp clamp on there, see how many amps we're drawing a little too far many amps on the starter, so I went ahead and replaced the starter. Got that cranking speed up, and it did help just a smidge, but we still got that little bit of extra couple seconds of extra cranking. So that's when I started diving into the other causes of the fuel bleeding down into the cylinders. So I told the customer, if in order to make it perfect, we're going to have to put a set of injectors in this tractor, and the engine's got 3,500 hours on it, and generally we would be putting, I see injectors fail on these, anywhere from 1,500 to 4,000 hours, so we're kind of right there in the middle anyway. So told the customer we need to put 6 injectors in it and see how it does from there. So I'm going to dive in this thing. I'm going to get the engine all blown off because it's kind of dirty on top of the engine. We don't want any of that getting inside the engine, so I'll get that cleaned up. And then I got to work on getting the rocker covers off. We're going to lock this thing over on number 1 TDC. We're going to remove all the rocker shafts, because on this one you actually have a rocker arm that actuates the injector. So we got to remove all the rocker shafts. We're going to lock it down into number 1 TDC, remove all that. We'll extract all 6 injectors out, install 6 new, and then we'll have to reset the entire overhead, the intake valves, the exhaust valves, and the injector preload. And we'll get that all set, and then get the top of the engine all back together, and we'll start it, let it prime up and run real good, and then we'll take it outside and let it sit overnight, and then start it the next day and see what happens. So let's get into it. All right, so the first thing we need to do is get this giant air pipe out of the way. This is our inner stage pipe for our turbos. So this is sucking air from our filter, blowing charge air into there, into our VGT turbo, and then it's blowing it through the aftercooler and then back into here, into our mixing chamber, into our intake. But disconnect this sensor here, take this clamp off, take these clamps off, and then there's 4 15s that bolt it on to the turbo there. So got to get this pipe out of the way because it sits right over our rocker cover. All right, so the first cool tool we're going to use is a 1/4 inch high-speed Milwaukee ratchet with a Matco extra deep turbo clamp socket. This is the 13mm flavor. beats the heck out of ratchet wrenching that all day long. Boy, look at the paint that came off that. Jeesh. I wonder it was struggling. So one thing you want to look out for here when you're messing with these, you want to make sure that it was seated correctly on here. And this one too. I've seen these pipes not get aligned correctly and not seal, and you can dust an engine that way. So this one seems to be right where it needs to be, but just something to look out for when you're taking any of these pipes off the turbos. Got a zip tie to cut. We've got our interstage air temperature sensor here. Now I've got just about all the major tool brands of flush cuts. I've got Knipex, I've got the Snap-on, and you know the ones I always grab are the Matco ones that have the spring in them. These are my favorite flush cuts now. Disconnect. Now I will have to Johnny and wrench these all the way off. Unfortunately, there's no easy way of doing these. You just can't get nothing in there. All right, I got the clamps undone on that one side. I went ahead and I put up a scaffolding up here to give me a nice place to stand up here when I'm working on the engine. So my little two-step stool to get up on the stand and then up here. And it works pretty good. All right, and the next thing we're going to do now is take these 4 bolts off right here and take this green pipe off the turbo. All right, you can get out of here now. Okay, so the next steps are going to be to get this turbo actuator and turbo speed sensor wiring off of here, get that out of the way. I'm going to take this crankcase vent pipe out and out of this rocker cover here, and then I'll be working on taking this little heat shield off right here that runs all the way down to there, and then I'll start taking out all the bolts for the rocker covers and pulling rocker covers out. Shield deleted. There. Well, that clamp didn't want to come down, but that one did. What I like to do, I like to take there's 2 18s and 1 15 bolt that hold this bracket on. I like to take that loose so I can move, because they're sitting like this, so I can move it out of my way to get to these bolts a lot easier. Now you can get those out, you just got to wrench them out, but I got to be able to torque these covers on later, and I'd rather them just be out of my way. Gonna have to wrench the rest. So I use Snap-on ratchet wrenches, really like these. Now we can sneak the rocker covers out. Pull our gaskets out. Windage tray, and there's also a gasket underneath that too. All right, now you can see the overhead. Look at all this crap that's in the way. So you see our injectors are clear down here where that connector is. See, we got a rocker, we got an intake valve. This is our injector rocker, and then we got our exhaust rocker right there. So that's one cylinder right there, 4 valves in the cylinder, got valve bridges. So our next step is we're going to rotate this over to top dead center. So down here on the right hand side of the block, we got a plastic plug that we're going to take out. And then we're going to plop in our crank turning tool into here. Oh, the hole's rusty. Just kind of grind our way in. There we go. There. Now that's engaged into the flywheel, and we can turn the engine over. And we're going to take this plug out right here. And when we get this turned over to number 1 top dead center, we'll be able to put a crank pin in there. And then up top, we'll be able to put a cam pin in there. And I'll show you what you're looking for whenever you're at number 1 TDC. All right, so I cranked the engine over until I could start to see the notch in the crank. Once you can see it, I'll stick my crank pin in there. And I'll just rotate it over until it plops. There it is. You can start to see the edge of the notch right there. It's about halfway in the hole. There. Just like that. It's a tight fit now. You gotta get it just so. Alright, so when we come up here, and we should be able to wiggle number 1, and we can't wiggle them. So now I know we're at the number 6 firing position. So now we need to go a full complete turn on the crankshaft. So I can put a mark on the harmonic balancer on the front, or the flywheel, whatever you can get to, and then turn it over 1 revolution, put our crank pin back in, and then our rocker arms on number 1 should be loose. All right, so I put a mark on the balancer there. I went a full crank revolution. I got the timing pin stuck in the hole, and now I'm gonna go up top and check. There we go. Now I know we're in number 1. So the next step is we got to get the camshaft timing pin in, and there's a hole down in here, and we'll have to move that flywheel probably back and forth just a little bit to get the camshaft pin in. All right, so we got our camshaft timing pin. On this end is narrower, that's our injector setting, and on this end is our number 1 TDC end, and it's fatter. So when we look at this camshaft, there's a tone wheel right here, and when we look at the tone wheel from the back side of the engine, there'll be a double notch, and the double notch should be at approximately 11 o'clock when we're looking at it from the rear of the engine. So there's a double notch showing about 11 o'clock, and this pin looks like it could probably go in. So I'm going to wiggle this crank back and forth. Alright, so I can't get it in, so sometimes you got to pull your crank pin out. Put your cam pin in first. Get it to drop. There. So that pin is in. So now I'll wiggle the crank back and forth until I get the crank pin in.
I have a bad feeling about this.
Okay, well, I got the pins in, but it isn't right. They are way too tight. So I had to move the crankshaft quite a ways in order to get that crank pin in. And now that pin is just super tight, and the one in the camshaft's even tighter. And I don't like it. It shouldn't be that way. Normally you'll plop the cam pin in first, and then you'll come down here and you'll rotate the crank until that crankshaft one will just plop in, and then this one you should be able to move, and then sometimes that one will just be slightly tight. It's not uncommon to have to wiggle the flywheel to get each one in and out, but to have to torque it that far, I mean, when I looked through this hole, whenever that cam pin went in, when I looked that hole, that slot in the camshaft was about 2-3 millimeters from where it needed to be to drop that pin in, and I had to force it into there further than I was comfortable with, but it went, but it's definitely way too tight.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
So What that's telling me is somebody's been in here before, and I could tell that the head gasket's been done on this thing at one point in time, because these covers and everything all been off, because I could tell that gasket's new. I could tell it's done, someone's done a head gasket on this thing, but what I think's wrong with it is the backlash and the timing gears is not set right. So I talked it over with the customer, told him what was going on. I'm like, hey man, we've got to get these timing gears and the backlash set right, because the way that these timing pins go in, it's not right. So there's got to be something wrong in the backlash there. So if we're going to be going in this far and doing injectors and have to reset the overhead, I want to make sure that the cam and crank timing is perfect the way I like to do it and the way I know that it works. So we added a bunch of time to this job, but
I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
It jumped up a notch.
so I'm gonna have to go in and I've got to remove the fan drives, and then I'll have to remove this upper cover. I'll have to remove the crank damper and remove the lower cover, because we got to go in and we got to loosen the center idler gear. We'll have to loosen the bolts on the cam gear, because we'll have to go in and we'll have to put feeler gauges in to set the backlash on everything and have the cam and crank pins locked in, redo the backlash with the feeler gauges correctly, and then retighten everything down with new bolts, because everything's one-time use bolts on those timing gear assemblies. But I want to do it now before I tear into these injectors, because whenever you set that backlash, you want to have the overhead set, because you want that spring tension on the camshaft whenever you set that backlash. So now's a good time to just, let's put a pin in this situation, let's fix this situation, and then go back to the injector situation. So that way, when we go back in and reset the overhead, everything is exactly where it needs to be. So now I'm going to work on getting this alternator off and this tensioner out of the way, so I can get this fan drive in and out of here, get disconnecting the fan, getting the belt and the fan driven assembly out of there, so then I can get to the timing covers. The belt and the tensioner's off. Got the electrical wires taken off the alternator, aka charging whirler if you're a Vice Grip Garage fan. Yeah, sure, just throw it on the floor, why don't you? Pry this guy out. There we go. I got the fan off the driven hub, and I'm taking all the bolts out for this drive outer sheet here. I can get the belt off. It just barely fits through there. Barely fits through there. Patty came over and helped me get this driven off real quick. It's a lot nicer when you got a second man here to help you manhandle that thing out. It's pretty heavy. So we got that off. So now all I got to get out is these brackets right here. They're holding this charge air pipe because they're going into that timing cover, and I'll be removing this timing cover right here. The cover broke free. There is a dowel up here that you got to get it off of. It's just got one bolt holding it. I'm gonna hook a strap through this hole right here and crane that thing out, because it's quite the chunk. So right there's where your fan drive goes in. That's your cam gear. And there's your idler gear. So, and what I forgot that there's a little plug right here that I can access in order I can get a feeler gauge through that plug to put in the teeth down there. Because what we're going to do is I'm going to get the cam and the crank. I'll get the cam locked in, and then I'm going to loosen all these bolts right here. That's what holds that cam gear on. There's a little hub that just kind of presses that gear onto the camshaft, and once you have those bolts loosened, you can actually spin the gear on the camshaft. And then I'm going to loosen all these bolts right here, and that'll allow this center carrier to be able to move to where I can get it positioned to where I can get my feeler gauge in here. So you can see somebody's been in here, they put a mark right here on this tooth. So I'm going to be putting the feeler gauge in here and down here, and once I get the cam and the crank locked down, and then I get this everything loose enough to where I can get my feeler gauge in up here and there, and then I'll torque it down with those feeler gauges in, and then my backlash will be correctly set. So somebody's been in here messing around before, and I don't know if you can see, but it's super tight in between those gears right there. So I'm going to try to fix that. Did that go in? Yeah, I'd say that's in. I'm going to go a little more. I like to feel it plop in. There. Cam is locked in. So these bolts are a 12.15 millimeter. See how much Loctite's on those? Someone went a little heavy on the Loctite, Lord. Now that I got those loosened up, I'm gonna work on getting that crank pin in. I got the crank pin in really easy after I loosened that stuff up, so that just goes to tell me that this backlash wouldn't set right at all. Because I turned the crank just a little bit and plop the pin right in. So now we just got to get the feeler gauges in. Alright, so I was able to get my timing pins in, and they just plopped nicely into the hole. Nice and loose, not tight at all. And here I've got a 5/1000 feeler gauge on the non-loaded side of the tooth. So this gear is turning this direction. So I've got it on the non-loaded side there. I've got it on the non-loaded side through this hole. The one in this hole is on the it's a 10/1000 feeler gauge. So 5/1000 in the top, 10/1000 on the bottom. Got it stuck in there. So here's a better look at that feeler gauge in the hole. So you can get them in, you can take a pry bar and kind of pry here up on the tooth to try and manipulate that gear up and down to where you can slide those feeler gauges in. And then once they're in, you want to load the gear. So whenever you kind of lift up on the teeth over there and load it this way, everything will just fall nicely into place, and those feeler gauges should be tight. You shouldn't be able to pull them out right now. So I'm going to explain the torquing process. So I'm going to pull each one of these out individually, clean the threads, and then I'm going to put Loctite 243, which is blue Loctite, on the bolt, and then I'm going to torque it to 30 foot-pounds. I'm going to do that to each one of these bolts, and we're going to torque this gear first. Once those are all torqued to 30 foot-pounds initially, then we're going to back them out 180 degrees, and then we're going to retorque those to 22 foot-pounds plus 60 degrees. and then those are locked in solid. Then we're going to remove, well, I already got these kind of cinched down with an impact. I didn't tighten them, but we'll tighten those. We'll torque these old bolts to 96 foot-pounds. And then we'll remove the crankshaft and camshaft pins. And then I'll move the flywheel back and forth, and I'll pull my feeler gauges out. Then we're going to rotate the engine 720 degrees, 2 full turns, and then we'll lock it back at number 1 TDC. And then we're going to go back in, we're going to remove each one of those bolts and then put Loctite on them, blue Loctite. And then we're going to torque them to 30 foot-pounds plus 90 degrees. So I'm going to get all that done. Okay, so everything is torqued down with new bolts and the timing pins go in like a dream. Man, we are just living the high life now. Got a 13.5 liter that's right, minus the injectors. So now we can get the cover, the face of the timing cover all cleaned up and get a new gasket, get the cover on there and torque down, throw all our fan drives and belts and alternator and all that stuff back on, and then this will be all tidied up, and then we can start the injector project. New tool alert. I just got this off the Matco truck. He made me one heck of a deal on this thing. And yeah, I got the bare tool and a 2.5 amp hour battery. That's one of my old batteries. I got the new one charging. But anyway, the Gen 2 90 degree, got 4 modes on the back here, and this thing's got a lot more power, a lot more speed, got better lighting. You can hold the chuck by holding in this button right here, and then you only need 1 wrench to loosen the chuck up. I like the trigger a lot better, feels better in your hand. And it just does a better job than the first gen die grinder, in my opinion. I already used it to clean up the surface where the gasket goes, and I just dialed or cleared down to 1. Yeah, 1, and went about that speed and just got it all cleaned up. But yeah, super impressed with the new Gen 2 die grinder. Highly recommend. Gotta pick it up. Uppy, up more. There you go. A little up more. There's the dowel. You gotta line up a dowel. I'm in my dowel. There you go. Bolt bin. Thanks, Ben.
Those 15s?
Yeah, just get them started. Just get one started and I'll get the rest.
Alright.
Thank you, buddy. I got the cover on, got all the bolts in. Now I'm going to torque them to 52 foot-pounds. And they got these numbers stamped on the timing cover for the torque sequence. Pretty nifty.
Spin it, Betty.
Alright, that one's in.
Whew! What do you think that thing weighs?
I don't know. I honestly don't. Does it say in the service manual when you look up that procedure for that?
For that, I don't know if it shows the new one what it weighs, but
Well, I guess you look it up in Parts Advisor and see.
I bet it's close to 90 pounds.
They're stout compared to the old ones.
You gotta pretty much hold that thing in there with one arm above your shoulders. But it really helps to have another person there that can get a bolt started.
Twist it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Doing that on your own sucks.
Yeah, that's not good to do by yourself. Thanks, Patty. Appreciate it.
Yes, sweetie.
Here's my long double box gear wrench. Well, I got to looking at this fan drive and I noticed, it had been leaking, had a bunch of oil on it. So I decided to take it apart, see what's going on. And to me, it looks like the seals on these two pistons are leaking. And then also I noticed the dirt seal here is cracked in two spots. See that? What's up with that? And this is the newer style dry drive. So this is the latest and greatest. Notice there's no splines on the shaft, but we need to see about fixing this leak here. When we pull, you can thread a M8 bolt into these pistons and then you can pull them out. Just like that. There's your piston. And then you've got an O-ring seal in here. So we'll look at getting some new seals because piston looks like it's in good shape. See if we can't bring this thing back around. Hey, look, a brand new fan drive. So I got to looking at the service history of this tractor, and this fan drive is almost exactly a year old. So it's leaking, the seal's cracked. I'm gonna go ahead and replace it under the parts warranty so we can get this taken care of. And it shouldn't have failed within a year. I mean, so it's not really common for those new ones to fail like that. So I just went ahead and got a brand new fan drive. So I just got to take this thing apart and transfer the vent over into this one, and then I can mount this new one up in there. And I got to run in the wiring harness for the fan speed sensor, and I realized me and Patty had this thing upside down, had the sensor down here, and it's supposed to be up the top. But no big deal. We just took the bolts out and spun that bearing housing and got it bolted back up in there so I get the sensor hooked up. Forgot I need to put I'm gonna put a little bit of lube on that. All right, and there you go. Everything is back together. Got the plug back in, shielding, the alternator and all that good stuff is all back together. What a crazy side quest that was. So now we can go back to the main mission, which was replacing the injectors. Let's get into it. We're up here now, and we got the crank locked at TDC number 1, because these number 1 valves are loose. They have lash. So the first thing we're going to do is start to loosen the tensioning on the rocker shaft bolts. So there's all these bolts here that are holding down the rocker shaft, and we're going to just loosen them by 2 revolutions each until they're all loose, because we don't want to take too much pressure off of them and cause the shaft to be deformed, because there's a lot of spring tension on those. And these are torque turn, one-time use. So we'll be putting new ones in when we go back together. Oh, baby. Why? No. Wow, those were tight. You know what? I'm going to go through and I'm just going to go ahead and detension all of the rocker arms first. So I've got a snap-on dual offset 17-19, and these are 17 and those are 19, so it works perfect for this job. Loosen those up. Loosen the injector. I take a 1/4-inch breaker bar with a 5mm Allen on it. That's what I like to use for these, because I can just spin like that. So we're going to take enough pressure off to where I can reach in, lift the valve up, and sneak the valve bridge out. Just like that. And we'll take the preload off the injector. Just like that. And I'll do that all the way down. Now, some of them you're not going to be able to get out because there's too much pressure on them. So you'll just have to wait until you get the rocker shaft bolts loosened up enough to where you can get them out. Like that one right there. Pretty tight. And you don't need to go more than a full revolution on the adjustment on the injectors. Holy moly. I got most of them cracked loose with the old mid torque. I got them loosened up pretty good now. I can probably pull these bridges out. Alright. Now all the valve bridges are out. Now we can pull these bolts and clamps out one at a time. Okay, so always mark the first injector here, number 1, and then I put a little T there just to reference the top side of the shaft, and then I just put zip ties through, oh, I got that caught in the spring. I just put zip ties through the holes where the bolts go, and that give you nice little lifting handles, and the rockers can't slide past the zip ties in the hole. We used to have a tool, it was like a plate that had 2 T-pins with like quick release buttons that would actually engage into these 2 holes right here and lock onto it. But it only works well with a 13.5 that doesn't have this tall rocker box. So like the old tier 3s would have that. Because you got to be able to fish this thing back and forth because of this little crossbar in this rocker box. So with this rocker box, there's just not a whole lot of room to get that thing in there. I mean, you kind of can move this and get that thing clipped in there and pull it out, and that kind of holds all the rockers into place, but it doesn't stop the ones on the end from flying off. So I decided just to use these zip ties to get this thing in and out. Now, it's not super easy to fish these in and out because those rockers slide around on the shaft and rotate and just want to catch on everything. But it is manageable. Okay. It takes a severe amount of wiggling, but it can be done. I mean, taking the rocker box off definitely makes a huge difference, but that requires a lot more other things to have to come off, and it's a pain in the butt. So, fighting the rocker shafts it is. On the back rocker shaft, you can only put a zip tie in the beginning and the end because you need to be able to slide the rockers around in order to get them out, and it's a real tight fit. Rocker shafts are out. Boy, that is a wrestle. Especially to get this back one out. There's just all kinds of crap in your way. So now we can see our 4 valves per cylinder and our injectors right there. So each injector has a hold down clamp, you can see, and it's got a external Torx bolt holding it on. So, but there's the wiring harness in there. So I got to get each injector unconnected from the wiring harness and then take the hold down bolt, and then I'll use a small indexing bar to pop those injectors out of the hole. But everything looks pretty good so far. All right, got the connector disconnected. You just got to push this little button right here and pull that out. Sometimes they can be stubborn now. Get that out of your way. We've got a snap-on, what is this, an E14 external Torx socket. There we go. That one was a little stubborn. Pull the injector out of the hole. And there's our injector. So the sealing ring goes on right there. So yeah, so we have, you know, kind of a mechanical style injector slash electric. So, you know, that rocker is pushing down on this plunger, which creates the high pressure in the injector, and then it electronically fires it. So it's always pushing this down the same amount, right, every time, but we can control how much fuel goes in the cylinder by the electronic injection portion of the injector itself. Pretty nifty, huh? So when you get a new injector, you get a new hold down bolt and sealing washer. And then you get this paper, and this is really important. So we need these numbers. So we're going to mark what cylinder we put this injector in, because we're going to need this paper later to import this part number and calibration code numbers into the ECU using Service Advisor. So can't just swap injectors. No, you got to tell it where it is and what part number and what injector serial number and calibration data it is. All right, got a brand new injector here. Got the sealing washer held on with some grease. Got the O-rings lubricate it up. Now I just plop it down in the hole. Nice and gently. Till it clicks like that. Then you're in place. Alright, so you lubricate the new hold down bolt with some clean engine oil. Plop it down in the hole. Okay. So we're gonna seat it to 30 foot-pounds. Alright, then we're gonna loosen it. Now we're going to change it to 106 inch-pounds. So final torque's 106 inch-pounds plus 90 degrees. 106 inch-pounds is like breathing on it. It's like just snug. Okay. And then we're going to switch to angle. 90 degrees. When you hit 90 degrees, you can almost feel the bolt yield. You can just tell, like, that's where it needs to be. We'll plug our new injector in like that, and bam. So I showed you how to do one cylinder. I'm gonna go ahead and do the other 6, and then I'll get back with you guys. All right, so I wanted to show you guys something. This is injector number 3, and let me get it to focus. Maybe a different lens. Yeah, see that O-ring right there? No bueno. Here's number 4. Yeah, that one's really chewed up. Look at that. So, this area right here is what's sealing off that fuel galley in the head. So if it doesn't seal here, it's going to go up into the overhead area on top of the head and then leak down into the crankcase. But then if it leaks here, it's going to leak down past and go into the cylinder direction this way. So I guarantee you that is the reason why we couldn't hold fuel pressure in the head and why it was having trouble starting at first, because we were bleeding the fuel galley down in the head. And when we keyed it on, it had to take a little bit of time to get that bled and prime back up again. And look at number 5. I pulled these 2 chunks off of number 5. Yeah, there we go. Jeez. Surprised this thing would even start at all. Good Lord. So here's injector number 6, and I've wiped it off, but it was all carboned up super bad, clear up to the first O-ring, and the cup and everything was just as bad. So our sealing washer didn't seem like it was doing sealing washer things. So I had to clean that cup up, and luckily the Mac tool guys came in clutch, because I needed a wire brush and a flexible extension. And so he sold me this kit. We've got all the different size wire brushes, and it'll go into this extension, cinches down with a little set screw, and then I was able to put it into a ratcheting screwdriver, and I sprayed the hole down with some throttle body cleaner, try to break up all that gum and varnish and everything, and got the hole cleaned up really good. So it looked okay to me, so I went ahead and I installed the 6th injector in. And when I put those injectors in, I'll tell you a little secret of mine, is I will wipe synthetic grease on it, on the O-rings. So I use this grease right here, the synthetic extreme duty grease, and I will attach the sealing washer with grease with that to get it to stick on the injector, and then I wipe the O-rings with this grease, and then I take my finger and put it in this John Deere cylinder liner soap, the sleeve soap, and then I just lightly put a layer of sleeve soap on the grease. And let me tell you what, them injectors just go click, really nice. So put those in there, and then I torque the hold down bolts to spec. But we got another situation. What do I do with those bolts? Okay, here they are. So what I noticed is this tractor does not have the 2 sealed head bolts in it. That has this seal right here, which sits right where the head and the block meets, and this will help keep oil contamination from going into the cooling system. Keeps oil from going in the coolant system. So you can tell if it's got the seal head bolts because it's got that little drilled dimple, and the head of the bolt is blue. So while I'm in there this deep and I have these bolts exposed, I told the customer we need to go ahead and put these 2 sealed head bolts in to prevent future problems, because we've had a lot of issues with the head gaskets will bleed oil into the coolant passage right where these 2 bolts are, and these 2 sealed head bolts are the fix for that instead of replacing the head gasket. So it's already had a new head gasket put on it once, so I want to go ahead and put these sealed head bolts in there to prevent any future problems from happening, because we're already that deep. It's not that big of a deal to put these in. So this bolt goes in between cylinder 5 and 6 and 1 and 2. So there's 2 bolts that you put in there, and I'll show you what I'm dealing with when I get up in there. So it's this bolt right here in between cylinder 1 and 2, and then it's the exact same bolt between 5 and 6 back in there, that one right there. So I'm going to try to get it out with my Gen 2 Milwaukee high torque with the forged battery, and I'm kind of charging hell with the water pistol, but I'm going to see what it'll do, because these things torque to 148 foot-pounds, and then you torque turn them 90 degrees 3 times. Yeah. Okay, little buddy. Woo! It did it, but man, about broke my wrist. That thing's got so much power, it's ridiculous. And there we go. There's our old head bolt. All right, so now we're going to put a chamfer in the hole, because the edge of that hole is really sharp, and we don't want to cut the seal on our new bolt, because that would defeat the whole purpose, right? So I take a flap wheel that's already worn down into a taper, and then I use this to make a nice little chamfer on that bolt, or on the hole of the bolt. So you just stick it down in here. I got some rags to keep, you know, any sanding debris from going into the engine, and I just sand that sharp edge down. So we got the hole chamfered, the edge is not sharp. We also got the hole cleaned out, so you don't want a bunch of oil down in the threads, because if you shove this bolt in and there's a bunch of oil in the threads, you will hydraulically compress that oil, and guess what, it's got to go somewhere. I have seen it where it's actually blew the head gasket out because the oil was trapped in there. So you want to blow as much oil as you possibly can. Now you do want to lubricate the threads of the new bolt with oil, but you want to make sure that all the excess oil drips off, okay? And then you want to use oil on your seal here, and then we're going to put ARP fastener lube on here. So I'm just going to put it on the head of the bolt. And what that's going to do is just keep the bolt head from chalking. You know, you ever tighten a bolt on something real tight and the bolt was chunk, 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 you know, chunking along? That's going to keep that from happening on here. I squirted it all at once there, didn't it? Alright. Just like that. Now we're going to drop our new bolt in the hole, and we're going to be really careful with these seals. Real gentle. Get those to plop down in there. Just like so. Run that down. Now I don't use an impact on these seal bolts. I don't want to spin that seal super fast. Okay. So I'm going to stand on this side, and I got the 3/4 snap-on tech angle out. And we're going to set it to 148 foot-pounds. That's what we're going to initially torque the bolt to. There it is. Okay. So now I'm going to take this off real quick. Now, I'm going to draw a line on the bolt head. Straight across. So we got a point of reference. So what I figured out, with that amount of extension on there, that if I set my tech angle to 115 degrees, it will be 90 degrees almost perfectly. So I've done this a time or two, because you have all the flex and everything, right? So now if I take this and I switch it to angle, it's at 115 degrees. So put that on there, and we're going to go to 115. Even though we're just turning 90. And then I'll take it off. And I'm going to check it. Yeah, my marks didn't really stick very good. There. So yeah. 115 on there, turned it just about perfectly 90 degrees. So that was one time. We got to do it three times. Here we go. I went a little over. I'm going to check it. Yeah, it went just a little bit over. I'll just undershoot it this time. Last time. It's 103. I'm going to check. Yep, we're there. That's it. So now I just got to do the exact same thing to that bolt back there. I'm going to take the bolt out between 5 and 6 now. I'm going to use my snap-on 3/4 ratchet because I can't get the high torque down in there very easily. There we go. There it is. So now I'm gonna get that hole cleaned out, get all the oil out of the hole, chamfer it like I showed you, and then we'll get a new bolt all lubricated up and get it installed and torqued. I got the new bolt shoved in there, all lubed up, ready to go. And it's muggy in here. It's almost 90 degrees in here and it's about 100% humidity. I'm sweating, dripping. 148. I'm gonna mark it. All right. It's really close. All right. I'll check. Oh, it's perfect. That's one. Big torque wrench right there, buddy. Yeah. Out there. All right, one more time. That's the chalking I was trying to prevent. Uh-oh. It says angle error. See? That's why you mark the bolts, in case the torque wrench fails. Just gotta go a little more. Just a little more. There. I don't know. The torque wrench just, when it started chalking like that, it said angle error in the middle of my third turn. That's why you mark them anyway. Never trust electronics. The new sealed head bolts are in. Yay. Now I can wrestle those rocker arm assemblies back into place. Ah, great. Still got the rocker shaft set in there. I got a few bolts in. One thing that really helps you get those installed is if you actually wrap a zip tie around all three arms and lock them down as a set so they can't swivel on the rocker shaft individually. That kind of helps manage the chaos as you're wrestling those things in. You don't necessarily have to do it when you're coming out with it. I mean, it might help a little bit, but I think it definitely helps when you're going back in to try to get everything set into place. So I'm putting new bolts in because we're going to have to torque turn those. So I'm in the process of getting all these holes lined up, getting new bolts in, and getting all the bolts kind of set and ran down with my fingers as far as I can. And then I'm going to go in and install all the valve bridges that I possibly can. Well, I should be able to get them all in at this stage because there's no tension on these bolts. So I'll get all the valve bridges in, and then I'll go to torque them down. And then when you're torquing these down, there's a torque sequence that you have to follow as well. Okay, so I got all the rocker bolts torqued, so I evenly tighten them with just a hand ratchet. There's 12 bolts, so I tightened 1, 6, 7, 12 halfway down to kind of get the rocker shaft seated evenly, and then I went through and evenly torqued all the bolts to 22 foot-pounds, and then I torque turn them 90 degrees. When I do the final 22 foot-pound torque, I start at 1 and work my way to 12, and then I come back, I reset my torque wrench to 90 and go all the way down. And of course I put the line on there just in case the torque wrench decides to be stupid for whatever reason. So got all those torqued down. Before I torqued the bolts, I went ahead and I put all the valve bridges in, set all them in, and then started tightening all my new rocker arm bolts. So those are new bolts, you get one-time use. Now I got the camshaft pin in the tone wheel of the camshaft and the crankshaft pin locked into the crankshaft. Both the timing pins went in beautifully, just like I like it. And now I'm going to go through and set all the injector preloads and the valve clearances. So this is why you need to pay attention in math in school, kids, because you can't do this without understanding math. So I make a little cheat sheet, and this one will work on the IT4 and Final Tier 4 13.5 liters. So what we're looking at here is our tone wheel on the camshaft. So right now we're in this number 1 TDC slot, which is a 10 millimeter slot, which only the thick end of the timing pin for the camshaft will go into. And then we're going to set at number 1 TDC, we're going to set the preload on injector 5. So we'll run the adjustment screw down till we have 0 lash, and then we're going to rotate it half a turn. So our preload, I got written up here, our preload is half a turn, and then we lock that nut down, and then we're going to set the valve clearance on intake 1, exhaust 1, 3, and 5. And our clearance for our intake is 12 thousandths and our exhaust is 26 thousandths. So I have 2 feeler gauges here. One is a 12 and the other one's a 14. So I have a set of Blue Point feeler gauges I got off the Snap-on truck, and they don't have a 26 in there. So what I do is I just grab a 12 and a 14. So when I combine them, I have 26 thousandths. So then I only have to have 2 feeler gauges, and then I put them on a little chain like this, so they stay together and I don't lose them. Okay, so that's the one easy little trick you can do there. And then once we get this step done at number 1 TDC, then we're going to rotate the crankshaft, and clockwise if looking from the front of the engine, counterclockwise if we're looking from the rear of the engine, and we will rotate the crankshaft 120 degrees. So the camshaft spins half the speed of the crankshaft. So 120 degrees on the crankshaft equals 60 degrees of rotation on the camshaft. So when we rotate 60 degrees, here we have our double notch. So when we're at number 1 TDC, our double notch will be about 11 o'clock, but we're going to rotate it. It'll go this way, and then we're going to stick the pin in the second notch, which is the injector 3 setting. So you have a little 3 right there. And this slot is 9 millimeters wide. So the 8.9 millimeter end of the tool will go in that slot. The big one will not fit in that slot. And all the other ones are 9 millimeter. All right. So on injector 3 slot, we're going to do injector 3 and intake 5. Rotate to 6 position, and that is our injector 6 and intake 3. Rotate again down here, that is our number 6 TDC. So at that point we have made a full crank rotation, 360 degrees. That is our number 2 injector position. So we'll At 6 TDC, we'll do injector 2 preload, and then we'll set intake 6, exhaust 246, and then we'll rotate to the number 4 position, which is injector 4, intake 2, and then to the injector 1 position, which is injector 1 and intake 4, and then we're all done. But yeah, quite a bit of cranking the engine over with the crank turner tool, and it takes a bit of time to get this process done. So I'm going to show you, I'll show you this first step right here, and then I will maybe speed up the rest or just kind of cut to it or whatever, because it's pretty self-explanatory. Once I show you how to set the injector preload, and once I show you how I set the valve clearances, everything else is pretty much self-explanatory. You're just rotating the camshaft 60 degrees, locking in that position, and then you're doing the steps. So if you're doing this and you're a John Deere technician, I recommend to just make yourself a little cheat sheet and then maybe laminate it for the next one. So, because when you read the procedure on this on Service Advisor, it goes on and on and on and on for a long time. It's very long. There's lots of pictures and everything. This is all you need right here, a little cheat sheet, and then you can get her done. And what I do is I write on the rockers. So I've got I1E, so that's my intake, that's my 1 injector, and then my 1 exhaust, and then so forth. And then whenever I do one, I put an X on it, because if you get interrupted in this process, you want to know where you left off. So I always put an X on there, and then plus when you get all done, everything should have an X on it so you know that you said it. All right. Math, science, physics. Isn't it awesome? Okay, so starting with injector number 5, because we're at the number 1 TDC position. So I can see I've already got some preload on that. So we want to loosen this up all the way. There. So right there, we're loose. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to tighten it with our fingers like this. Just finger tight. See the right there? Boop. Right there is 0 lash, right? We're not preloading it, but we don't have any clearance in between the rocker and the injector. Okay? So at that point right there, what I'm going to do is I like to put a little dot right on right there. Okay, so what I say the injector preload was, it's a half a turn, right? So if I stick my wrench in here, we're going to be going half a turn. That's set in there. Boom, right there, half a turn. And one thing you can do also, let me put this back, is you can have it right here, and you could also position your breaker bar like this, and then you could just eyeball this and go half a turn, but you run into crap, you see. So right there is about half. So then we're going to tighten the nut down, and then see, this is another reason why I do this, because you can slip this right in over that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to hold pressure this to keep, because when we tighten this nut, that adjustment screw is going to want to turn. So we're going to tighten this as we kind of hold this. We don't want to back it off, we just want to keep it from turning. And we're going to tighten the crap out of it. Now there is a torque spec on these, but I've done so many that I know what it feels like when it's good and tight. Plus, you'd have to have a torque adapter or something to make that work. So I'm not going to do that. This is how I've been doing it for years. Never had a problem. So boom. So injector 5 is set. So now we're going to mark it in a way we can understand. I just put an X. Okay. Simple enough. Okay, so now we're going to work on the valve clearance. So we're going to start with number 1, intake. I also mark them with a paint marker to easily identify them because, you know, they're kind of hard to read sometimes. So we're going to go ahead and set the intake to 12 thousandths. So you can use these style feeler gauges, or they make some that have a 45-degree angle as well, because you kind of, you know, it's easier to get in there. But, you know, these flex enough you can get in there just as easily. But it doesn't matter what you use as long as the gap is 12 thousandths there. So we're going to put this in between the foot of the rocker and the valve bridge, and I'm just going to tighten this down till we have, I like to go about as tight as my 2 fingers can get it. So right there we can't move the feeler gauge at all, right? So that just kind of seats everything, and then we're going to back it off to where we've got a slight drag on the feeler gauge. We should be able to move it in and out. Okay, so slight drag on the feeler gauge, tighten it down. So now we can slide our wrench over there, and then we're going to flip this down, and we're going to hold slight pressure this direction so it doesn't turn, just like the injector preload. Okay, and then we're going to tighten it. Just like that. And when we get done, we shouldn't be able to rock this at all, and we should be able to move our feeler gauge. Okay, we can still move our feeler gauge. We don't have any rocker arm movement, and then we can pull it out. All right, and now we should have our 12 thousandths valve clearance right there. Okay, so that one is done. Now we're going to move to our exhaust. We're going to slip both the feeler gauges in to get our 26 thousandths. And then we're going to run this down. Tight as I can with 2 fingers, can't move it. And then we're going to back it off and get that feel for that slight drag. And you'll get kind of a feel for this after you do a bunch of them. Okay. Can't rock it. Slight drag back and forth. Done. And then we're going to mark that one done. You always mark it right after you get done. Don't forget. Boom. Okay. So I just showed you how to do the injector, how to do the intake, how to do the exhaust. So now we just got to follow the same steps in the order that I showed you on the paper. So I'm going to get her done. Okay, so I've got intake on 1, exhaust 1, the exhaust of 3, and the exhaust of 5 done. So then I rotated the crankshaft 120 degrees, 60 degrees of cam rotation, and now I'm in this second slot. So whenever you're turning this over, of course you have the pins out, of course. You can look down through this hole and you can see this tone wheel turn. So as you're turning, you're looking for this first notch to show up. You're going to let it pass, and then you're looking for the second notch right here. And then once you get really close, stick your pin in the hole and rotate the crankshaft until this pin clicks into this hole right here. So now we're in injector 3 position. So we got to set the preload on injector 3, and intake 5. So once we get that done, then I'm just rotating it until I see this next notch show up, and I stick the pin in, and then so forth. Okay, so I wanted to go through a little bit of the rotation with you guys, just so you know what you're looking for. But after this one right here, this is the only one you got to pay attention to. You got to go in the second slot right here, and then everyone after that is just the next notch. Okay, no confusion there. And then you just follow these steps. All right, I got it all done. Whew. My left arm's about wore out, so I got this ratchet right here, and I figured out it's about 60 of these. 60 cranks per notch that you got to go in. So, you know, 60 times 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, you do the math. That is a lot of cranking this engine over. Plus, you know, you're constantly going up and down trying to see that hole right there, because you can't look at the hole and reach down and crank at the same time. So you're constantly going back and forth. It's a workout, let me tell you, but it is all set, man. This thing's gonna run great when I get done. So now I'm gonna get these rocker covers cleaned up. We'll get new gaskets set on here, get the rocker covers on, get them torqued down, and then get everything back together on top here, which really only consists of putting this bracket back in, the crankcase, vent pipe, and the interstage charge air pipe in between the two turbos. And then we'll be able to calibrate the injectors. And it's all back together. Whew. It's hot, Bob. It's like, I temped the concrete in here earlier. It was 89 degrees on the concrete. Right outside the door here is the concrete's 122 degrees, and it's about 60% humidity. UV index is 9. I'm dripping. So now we're going to go in the cab, where it's probably even hotter in there with the doors all shut, and we're going to calibrate the injectors, and then we can fire this thing. All right, remember those papers I said I had to save? So I've got the #1 injector right here. So here it tells you the current value changed to on the part number, the serial number, and the calibration code. So I'll just use the numbers off the sheet, insert all the correct information, and then I'll accept it, and it'll be done. We'll be ready to fire. All right, those of you that made it this far, are you excited to hear this thing rumble? Yeah, me too. Okay. Fire in the hole. Yeah, I had to clear all the excess fuel out of the cylinder. But she's alive! Yes! Oh, what a thing of beauty. That thing's purring like a kitty. There's hardly any vibration. This thing is like abnormally smooth. Wow. All right, now that we got the fuel system primed up, let's shut it off and restart it, see what it sounds like. There ain't no extended crank now, by golly. It starts up so fast I can't even hardly read the cranking speed. We'll let the engine get some temperature in it. It's only sitting at 109 degrees right now. We'll let it get up to temp, and then we'll give her some, we'll feed her the ketchup, all of the ketchup. Very responsive. All right, everything runs perfect. Fixed. So I'm gonna run this thing a little longer and get it up to operating temperature, and then I'm gonna drop the oil, and then I'm just gonna let it sit and drain all weekend. It's Friday. I got the tractor fixed again. 2 Fridays in a row I was able to get a problem fixed and then leave for the weekend. Man, that's a good feeling. But super hot today. I'm ready to go home. You know, only got a half hour left, so I'm going to run this thing for 10-15 minutes, let it get warmed up, and then I'm just going to drop the oil, let it drain all weekend. Then I'll come back in Monday morning, put fresh new oil in it, change the filter, and then we'll see how it fires up the first time after it sits for 2 days. So it should be just fine. So it starts up like right now. So pretty happy about that. And man, if you guys have made it to this part of the video, I really appreciate it. You guys are awesome. You are the top fans of this channel for sure. Appreciate you guys watching. Like the video if you haven't already. Like it. Hit the subscribe button. Comment below. Let me know how I'm doing. And until next time, keep that green iron moving.